All right, welcome to this episode of Magnify the Middle. With us today is Amy Dolzine. She works at Ernst & Young, and she is a Microsoft MVP on the Microsoft Viva platform. But today we're going to talk about community engagement and how we can all learn, whether we're full-time in the office, hybrid, or fully remote, how we can use some of these concepts that are available in tools like Microsoft Viva and others, but more specifically, kind of regardless of tools, how you do community engagement. So first, Amy, maybe just quickly introduce yourself, give us a little bit of your background.
Sure, thanks. I'm Amy Dolzine, as you mentioned. I work at EY, and I'm the Microsoft Alliance Relationship Director for the Americas. We have a very large multi-billion-dollar alliance with Microsoft. We go to market with them. They're a customer of ours. We're a customer of theirs. But I also have several years of experience in consulting and several years of experience in deploying Microsoft platform. I have worked in a number of different places all over the Cleveland area since I moved here after we went to Denison together.
That's right.
So I've seen community building in a lot of different places, from chemical companies to like the companies that I have advised in, as well as within EY itself. So.
Yeah, so and you actually got started in the Yammer space, right? So maybe tell everybody a little bit of like what Yammer is. They might not be familiar.
Sure. So there's a product called Yammer that was acquired by Microsoft back in 2012. It recently has changed its name to Viva Engage to be wrapped up into the whole Viva platform, the employee experience platform that they've been rolling out, which involves, I think it's 8 different things right now, and then I'm sure there are more on the way, because the employee experience is just a really important topic and something to remember, to always keep the humans at the center of what you're doing in your work, because it's the people, as you know, in HR, that make your business what they are. The products are great, but it's always the people behind them. So anyway, to get back to your question, Yammer is what's called an enterprise social network. Yeah. So in a way to speak with your colleagues within your own company in a sort of consumer way that makes it feel a little bit more comfortable, or a little bit more an expected consumer approach to how you would have conversations in a digital space. It isn't Facebook for work. That's another product. It isn't Twitter for work. It's like its own private, secure way of having these kinds of conversations within your own firm. It is now called Viva Engage, as I mentioned, because it is really about employee engagement. It's about how do you make sure that you are connecting with people on a either huge level or one-on-one, or from a leadership perspective, being able to get a message out to everybody in a clear and authentic way, but having it also be secure and part of your whole platform. Now, my MVP for Microsoft is within that Viva Engage space. However, I have been using these Microsoft products for forever. I mean, since I think I rolled out my first SharePoint site back in, 2007 maybe.
Yeah,
because
that's a long time.
Because I was always the person who, and I still am the person who loves to use this technology to find a better way to do something, or an easier way or a faster way to get people to be more productive with each other or share things. And so when I was working at Lubrizol, for example, I was the one who was, from our marketing communications perspective, we have all these brochures. We need a way to organize them. We need a place that we could put them all in one place so that all of our salespeople could access them without having to email old versions to each other. Let's get them all in one place. And then let's build an iPad app that they can go to the SharePoint site and download the brochures and all the documentation they would need about a product. So I just loved doing that kind of nerdy stuff. Even though I love marketing communications, I also love the nerdy kind of library SharePoint stuff too. And then I went into the IT department at Lubrizol and helped roll out Yammer to Lubrizol. We were kind of trying to figure out which employee experience or which social network we would go with, and we ended up rolling out Yammer, and then that brought me to EY, where I helped continue to roll out our Yammer network at EY. and then moved into consulting for a few years, where I was helping to deploy not just enterprise social, but also the Microsoft 365 platform and Teams to some of our customers, and now I'm in the Microsoft Alliance.
Yeah, but I think what was interesting about kind of our pre-conversations, we were talking about some of the things you've done, is there's some kind of fundamentals to community engagement that anybody can do, sort of like regardless of platform and regardless of your state, whether community and engagement isn't necessarily about full-time in the office. It's not about hybrid. It's not about fully remote. There's like, you outlined, I thought, some interesting concepts. So maybe just share like some of those key ideas you had around community, regardless of what tool, regardless of your kind of work format structure.
Yeah. So a lot of the community management ideas have been around for quite some time. There's a whole practice around community management. There is something that will likely resonate with people is maybe this idea of a community of practice. So if you've got all of the people who are interested in HR, you might create an HR community, or you might create a community of practice around I don't know, competitive intelligence or something. You know, these are all the people who love competitive intelligence. Let's have a community about that. Yeah. It isn't just necessarily your work boundary. Like maybe there's somebody who is in finance who loves competitive intelligence.
Or could be one of your customers.
Or one of your, exactly. So if you're working within the bounds of your own company, you can create a community of practice within your own company. However, you can also create these communities outside, like in LinkedIn or Facebook. You know, you can there's a lot of different platforms where you can do this. Microsoft also has the ability to have an external Viva Engage network as well. So like you can do this too in external ways. Most of my expertise is around like how you do it in your own company, how you build community within your own firm. When I work for a very large organization, and so trying to find everybody who knows everything about, let's say we have a community practice around Power BI, which is a business intelligence platform. I know you in finance would know what that is. You probably use it all the time, but there's some nuance and questions and like, how do I build it this way, and why isn't this filter working that way? You can build a community of people who love Power BI, and you establish a community manager or managers, preferably to have one or two or more instead of just one person, because you know that it requires some teamwork. And it also requires some passion for the thing. So you find a community manager who really loves that thing and wants to help people and wants to help make sure that people are connected with each other and with the content that will help them. And you kind of help people help each other. So often these communities of practice get built around question and answer. Like somebody has a question, how do I? Or I've got this problem, how did you solve it? And then people will respond. Sometimes the community manager's responsibility is to make sure that those questions get answered.
Yeah, so I want to just pause for a second, because I mean, I think people may have picked up this word community manager from you just now, but just to really stress how important that role is, because I think we've all been a part of some group that there's an initial spark from somebody that's really interested and they kind of get things going and maybe they leave or fizzle out, but that role kind of needs to be present to keep these communities going. And even though you have all these tools and digital things, unless you have that key role with maybe a second chair, it's easy to let them fizzle or people don't feel it. Because like you said, they have to ask, make sure those questions are getting answered. And it's a pretty big job. It can be, depending on the size of the community.
For sure, yeah. And it is an absolute game changer when you have a community manager involved. Those communities thrive, and we've done tons of studies and data on it, and analyzed which communities are what we would consider healthiest. Like they have a lot of engagement, they have a lot of likes, they have a lot of sharing, they have a lot of back and forth conversations that are not just hey, how are you, but you know, in depth, multi-tiered conversations. When there's a community manager involved, that's where those communities really thrive. And those community managers, they are the ones who, they're not necessarily feeding the community. They can be the people who feed the community new ideas, or like, hey, did you see about this or did you hear about that? But often they're the connector. They're the one who says, hey, Jeff, you have this great question. Elizabeth just answered this last week on something else. Here's her answer, but you might want to talk to each other.
Yeah.
That community manager is a connector, and it's a special person who really wants to be a community manager. Not everybody is going to want to do this, depending on their passion for the topic, depending on their interest.
Because to your point, it's not necessarily the leader, right? And
No.
it's not necessarily the person doing all the work. It's just the person kind of facilitating and making sure it's all happening. We have this concept. Maybe you talk about study groups, Elizabeth. Do you want to talk about study groups at Valmark and explain those?
Yeah, I guess that would be similar to our community. So we've pulled together like-minded topics and groups of people that have a passion for that topic, and have gotten them together in different groups. And there's two leaders typically of that group, one that is sponsored by our company and the one that's sponsored externally. And what we found is that if we try to sponsor this only internally through our company, it never works. It just fails because it becomes too corporate. But when it's sponsored externally by our members, there's a lot more, camaraderie, buy-in, a lot more. This is my peer-led group, and that's sort of what happens in those groups. Is, hey, how are you guys handling this? And did you see this that came out? And how does this apply to your company?
Yep.
And it's so our role internally is more of like that connector role.
Yep.
Like, I know someone else that's working through that challenge. Can I put you together with them, and you can put your heads together on that?
Yeah, exactly. That is essentially exactly what a good community manager does is really build connections with people, between people, and the information that they need to get their job done. So it's like people and data. How do you get them together? Yeah.
So in your world, is this a full-time role, a community manager?
Is it a full-time role? So it is not a full-time role. In general, it is usually part-time. It depends on where the community is in its life cycle. All communities have this sort of life cycle. Sometimes they start up, they're really active, they grow, they're mature. Sometimes they also die off because you no longer need that thing. Like, that technology isn't available or that thing isn't there. So at the beginning, if you're just setting up a community, sometimes it can be pretty intense for a few weeks as you're trying to like get things off the ground. If you want to put a program together of the kinds of programming you're going to have in your community, like we want to have an AMA on this date, and we want to make sure we share this content on that date, or we want to have a discussion with the leader in this community on this date. Like, you might put together a calendar of things, or you want to make sure you've got the right people in the community, so you're doing your own internal outreach to like making sure your community gets listed in newsletters or whatever. Like, that first setup part can take it can be intense. But usually the people who are starting up these communities care so much about the thing, they don't even think of it as like work, because they want to do it. And then over time, as the community grows and matures, it starts to take care of itself. If you've been a good, farmer of like sowing the seeds and tilling the soil and making sure that people, like the people are getting together and that they're answering each other's questions, and the community kind of takes care of itself, and you don't have to be as involved. My only thing would be, if you're a community manager, you should be at least once a day checking in on your community, because
especially if you're using some of these like social tools and there's not a formal meeting, because somebody could be chiming in at any given point.
Exactly, especially if you're global.
And if more than a day goes by, they just might not feel heard. So in our world, that might look like someone emailing the group, and if no one else replies, stepping in and, hey guys, Joe had a question.
Exactly. Right. I think of it as, so let's say you've got this big giant it's a public community. The public meaning the whole firm can see it. Not public to the public, but public to everybody else. Everybody, if they chose to, could come to that screen and they would see all the conversations going on. And some person asks a question in that community. I don't know how to do this, that, or the other thing. I don't know how to make this table do this thing, and I've got a presentation that I've got to do tomorrow. Can somebody help me? And nobody in the community answers that. That's like somebody standing up in a conference, like in a meeting with all of your people standing in front of you, like on stage, and somebody in the audience stands up and asks a question and nobody answers them. Like, wouldn't that feel awful? Like, that would just feel awful.
I love this example. And when you first said it, I really thought about that. That is such a great analogy that we don't think of, because when we see things on the screen, we disassociate them from a human being.
Yep.
But behind that screen was a human being seeking help with a group of people they felt maybe they trusted or whatever, that sort of like let them down.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's what happened. It wasn't just a comment that wasn't responded to. It was a human being that got let down by their community.
Right.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the real values a community manager can bring is, hey, because they may not know the answer. It might be really like a hard question. They might say, hey, I saw your question. I don't know how to answer it, but I think Jeff does. Or I don't know how to answer your question. Hey, Elizabeth, do you know anything about this? Or do you know the next person they can talk to? That, and just keeping up on that to make sure that the people feel heard. And then they feel also psychologically safe, that they haven't been let down or that they haven't asked a stupid question.
Yeah, especially if they're newer to the community,
Yes.
right? Because they have no idea. They just didn't get a response. Yeah, was my question dumb? No one care? Like, who knows what runs through their head when there is no response?
Exactly. Yeah. Or let's say, and this doesn't happen very often, people do worry that it will happen a lot, but like what if somebody puts something inappropriate in your community?
So
I was just going to ask about that.
Can I just have this is a small set. We rolled out Yammer for like a quick minute just to try it. And we had an admin. They didn't quite understand the difference between like Facebook and our internal corporate Yammer. And they made some joke about like getting loaded and drunk the night before. And it was posted to everyone in the company.
Yeah.
And it was quickly shut down right after that event.
Right.
So then we had to give some feedback like, hey, just so you know, like the CEO saw that.
Yeah.
And I know it was a joke, but he doesn't know you.
So yeah.
Get your box ready.
So that's the thing that a community manager can do. You can have a community manager of your entire network, like somebody who helps set the rules, who posts them. Like, these are our community standards. These are the things that we do in all of our communities. And they're often exactly the same thing as your technical guidelines of how you use technology within your firm anyway. Like what you would tell an employee about how to email somebody, or use the same rules of the road so that people don't think it's something different just because it's so social. I can say whatever I want. You have to remember this is a corporate thing. And when they join, they have to say yes, they join. Anyway, so a community manager can help you set that up. They can also set the rules for their specific community too. Like in this community, we're a question and answer community. In this community, we are like the pets of EY community, which we got because we like to get to know people.
Yeah.
When you've got as many people as we do, like how in the world are you going to get to know somebody? People like to share pictures of their pets or what's going on, or the weekend bakers of EY. We've got one of those too, where the people make the most amazing cakes, decorated, and they post them pictures, and it just helps people feel
what a fun concept.
like they're people, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so you have like rules around what you can and can't share. A photography club, what you can and can't, has to be your own photography. Like there's all kinds of rules that each community sets for itself. A community manager, that's their responsibility, is to set up the rules of the road for that community and help make sure they get maintained. And they can also be the person who, I always like to say, praises in public and corrects in private. So if they saw one of those posts, like this poor person that made that mistake, they could delete that post.
Oh, yeah.
And take it out of so that nobody else would see it. Limit the damage, but then also reach out to that person privately and say, hey, we took this down because, and it becomes a teachable moment. Yeah. And the person isn't embarrassed across like forever around that. It doesn't live out there forever. There's somebody who's like minding the store and like taking care of people. And then sometimes there's some questionable, you're not sure how to handle it. Sometimes conversations do get heated, like not often, but they can, especially around election times, and people say stupid things, or they say things that get misinterpreted, language barriers, cultural differences.
Especially in a diverse
especially in
team.
a huge company.
Yeah.
So it gives you an opportunity, if a community manager is responsible for that, they can take the two people who are having this debate kind of to the side and have a call on the side and be like, hey guys, I understand that you're going, this is a problem, but maybe this isn't the right forum to be having that conversation. I don't want to correct you in public about this. I don't want to make you look like you're children, right? But maybe you guys could come to an agreement not to talk about this right now.
Yeah, or just take it sideline. If you guys want to email each other about it
Go
all day
ahead.
long, yeah,
Yes.
have fun.
And there are tools within these platforms where you can actually shut down conversations. You can either delete the whole thing or you can stop commenting on that things to stop the threads from going out of control. And that's, again, the value of a community manager is someone who understands people, who understands the business problems we're trying to solve with these communities and helps elevate that each and every time.
So how popular have communities become since the pandemic? And even after employees have returned to the workplace, but maybe have stayed just like a hybrid work from home environment and companies are trying to redefine culture, has that really changed the landscape of how popular communities have become?
It really has for many, many companies out there because especially for new people joining a company who had to join during the pandemic, who had to even just come into the workforce for the first time without an office to go to. Sometimes there are communities who have these like show me out your window kind of, not contests, but engagements where they'll say, snap a picture of what's going on outside your window, and they put them into the community so people can be like, oh, wow, that person has the most amazing view of Shanghai, and this, oh my God, look at this. Or they have the opportunity, because these communities are not just about fun things, they're also about the actual work going on. So in the oil and gas community, they might be talking about some new regulation and how here's some thought leadership around this. Here's a blog post you might not have seen. It helps people get connected to one another, regardless of what office they're in, and helps them have a little bit more, have a chance to have a sense of a water cooler or community that they can talk to. So it also depends on how open the company's leadership is to having this kind of thing. Some companies are much more conservative or very protective and don't understand the value of these things. And so it really does depend on how open the leadership is to encouraging this kind of community idea. When the leadership is bought in and they're involved in the community, if they're posting, they're sharing, they're liking, they're responding, then people realize, oh, this is important. This is a business value to my firm. Wow, the CEO just commented on my post or said thank you for sharing something. That's amazing, right?
Yeah, especially in maybe larger organizations too, where they may not be physically in the same building or even geography or area. It can be hard to connect, and that's a good way for leaders to connect with others. I know we have our president and COO. He sends out this, like, I don't know, kind of random, maybe once a month. It's like a 2-minute video, just like, how are you? And people absolutely love it. And he's like, really? I'm like, yes. Yes.
Yes,
It's like,
they
that's a
do.
little too much.
They absolutely do.
They do.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I bet they would like it even more if an employee did the same thing and posted a couple-minute video about something that they've been working on that they're really proud of. All right. Well,
All the time.
That's amazing. Well, let's say it's like the new intern, right?
Yeah.
Who just starts at your company and they're like excited about some new thing that they found, or something that they really think will make a difference for many other people, and they want them to know about it. So they snap a quick 1-minute video, or they write up a quick blog post, and they put it on their storyline. Yeah. And let's say the CEO responds to that, and like, hey, wow,
massive engagement.
Like, great, I love this. This is amazing. Thank you so much for sharing this with all of us. Does anybody else have anything? All of a sudden, explosion of all of this tacit knowledge that's been held in all the heads of all your people. They finally have a place to share it with each other, and you can all benefit. Because nobody knows, what does my friend say all the time? You don't know who knows, and you don't know who needs to know what you know until you kind of share your knowledge out there.
Yeah, I do a fair amount of research on like LinkedIn and stuff, and they have this concept of like a silent lurker. So you might post something, no likes, no comments, nothing or whatever, but then out of nowhere, somebody's like, hey, I saw that thing you did. That was really helpful to me. And you're like, I had no idea that you looked at that or even knew about that.
Yeah. I like to say lurkers are people too.
It's like a t-shirt slogan.
Lurkers are people too. That is going to be, I think that's going to be the quote of the podcast. Lurkers are people too.
Because it's true. Like, they may not ever comment.
Right.
They may like, who knows, but they also are going to learn something, and that will improve the other people around them. Or they might share that knowledge in a private space somewhere else. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
Like, they just may not be the kind of person who's willing to stand up in the conference room and ask their question, right? Or answer something. So, yeah, lurkers are people too.
So I got a question. I think our leadership team would be really into this. I think they would love it and they'd be very active. I'm thinking of the employees that like to keep their head down and they like to focus, and a little social activity might make them a little grumpy on the distractions. I'm assuming you can dial it up and dial it down, customized.
Absolutely. Yes. I mean, every person typically has control over what they get notified on in any platform. Like, you have the ability to turn off the notifications, keep them on, be as engaged as you want.
We actually, in our department, we had like a department group chat, and then a couple people were sending like memes and other funny stuff. And we got some feedback. Some people were like, hey, I'm saving that in case I actually need to do something. So will you guys knock it off?
Yep.
And so what we did is we created a group called IT Memes and Dreams. And so
Perfect.
all the funny stuff goes there. So if you need a break and you need some funny stuff, you can go there. But if you know that it's just the funny stuff, and the serious stuff goes in this other channel.
100%. That is
Yeah.
what a good community manager does. You've been a community manager without knowing it.
All right.
Because we had the same problem. I think many organizations did. There's one big group called All Company, typically.
We lock that down.
Yes, right.
We get out of control very quickly.
Yes, yes. So you couldn't lock it down for a long, long time. Like, thank
really?
God they finally allow this, because that thing would happen. The math riddles would just those you've seen them where they're like.
That's the thing that gets posted to the all company chat, the math.
Sometimes, yes. Like, and it was out of control. And so, like,
People
you
spend
create
an hour, like EY, 500,000 people working on this funny math problem.
But yeah, they weren't, because everybody was getting turned off by what was going on, and so it wasn't serving a business purpose. We were like, hey guys, like that you like to engage, let's give you a place to do that, and let's move those conversations over there. You can have your fun, and the rest of us can go focus on other things, which is why you create those like weekend bakers of EY or the pets of EY or the other communities, because some people like to focus on this thing, and that's great. Some people like a little bit of a distraction, and as long as you have a place to do that, it's fine.
So to really encourage engagement, when you're implementing this with a company, do you encourage them to force a certain level of engagement? Does everybody have to participate?
No.
They could ignore everything if they wanted to.
Yeah. I mean, when I was first introduced to this concept, there were these, the idea of like people that are red dots, yellow dots, and green dots. And your green dots are going to take to this like water. They're going to always want to do it. They're going to be they're going to be Jeff. They're going to be anything new. Give it to me. I want to try it, right? Mm-hmm. You don't have to convince them to do anything. The yellow dots are like, well, I mean, maybe I want to see somebody else do it first, or I want to see somebody else like me do it first before, or I'm just going to lurk around and see what this is all about.
Safe, yep.
Mm-hmm. And then these red dots are like, forget that. That is the stupidest thing I've ever seen in my life. I can't believe you're wasting your time doing that.
And by
like,
forget that, you mean that.
Exactly. And so I don't ever think doing something and asking for 100% participation is, you're not going to get good participation.
In fact, it might have the opposite
disengagement.
intent, right?
Exactly.
You're just forced, and then it's not engaging.
So when I'm rolling out communities, I like to spend a lot of time. I don't have to spend a lot of time with the green dots. I mean, because they're gonna. But you want to encourage them to do the right kinds of things. I like to spend a lot of time with the yellow dots and be like, all right, here's how we could help make this useful for you. Here's how this might be helpful. Here's how we make sure that the business value of this thing gets accomplished. And sometimes when you get pushback from red dots, you can engage with them, but I don't spend a whole lot of time because there's no point in pushing them. They'll just push back harder. Sometimes those red dots, though, when they start to see a really cool business value, like, for example, I think we came up, this was a few years ago, there was some big regulation that was coming through, and they came up with a whole new business plan in an AMA about here's how we should do this and here's how we should, and like, they got all this business value out of this one conversation. Some of those red dots were like, oh, wait a minute, this is actually a good thing. And they sometimes become your biggest green dots after that.
Okay.
But if you had forced them to do it,
Never would have happened.
no, because they
Sure.
would have pushed back, or they would have had snarky comments, or I can't believe I have to post in this stupid thing. You know,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
that's not the kind of engagement that you want.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
So we talked about, so to create some engagement, and you need a community manager. Any other like just key fundamentals you feel like you really need to have in place before you try to build these sort of communities?
Yes. My number one tip for all employee engagement is if you want people to engage in your community, you have to engage with them. That is you can put all the plans in place that you want. You can build out a whole community calendar, a whole editorial calendar of the things you're going to talk about. But if you're not actually engaging with the humans on the other side of that community, you're not going to get any engagement. It isn't about posting stuff. It's about talking and conversing. And so the best way to
answering the questions when they
Yes.
get asked.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just be
It's
involved.
if you want to build engagement, engage with people. That's how you do it. It's that simple.
I think that's a great way to end. Amy, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us today,
pleasure.
and I appreciate it. This has been an episode of Magnify the Middle with Jeff Moore and Elizabeth Kazenko. Thanks.